Um, yeah, so without further ado, I think we should get going. Just briefly to introduce the analysts on the call. So we have Ben and Aidan from the data side of things, Catherine, who wrote the report and is a journalist, and then Martin, who's from our editorial team and input into the report in a very big way. So just to quickly cover what we're going to be digging into. So we're going to start off by just talking about why we decided to do this report. Then we'll move on to setting the scene, giving some context of golf in the landscape right now. Then we'll move on to some key storylines from the report, move on to a Q&A, and then finally we'll end with some next steps, which hopefully might end with, the report being purchased or whatever the case may be. So why golf now? So obviously it's not going to be a surprise to anybody here that to hear that, obviously the game's been going through a period of massive disruption, and with, murmurings, rumors about a resolution becoming a bit more clear between Liv and the PGA Tour, it felt like at the right time to really dig deep into the numbers and understand the commercial landscape of golf and what a resolution between these two governing bodies will look like. Secondly, our findings in last year's global media report saw the golf share of global media market has been decreasing. So the question really we wanted to answer is how can the game survive and thrive as a tier one sport when there are so many sports obviously vying for the same eyeballs, and it's obviously a very competitive market. And then finally, on a more practical and simplistic level, the way the game is being watched and played has changed a lot. So what do those shifting trends mean for the game's key powers commercially? And that's something that we try to answer in the report. So yeah, there's obviously a lot of noise around golf. You know, there's headlines every single day. It seems like, things are evolving very quickly. But we want to cut through that speculation and provide, hard numbers and figures, information on market trends, and then expert insight from the people in the know, help decision makers navigate the future of golf. So I'm just going to hand you guys over to Ben, who's going to just talk about some of those big picture numbers in a little bit more detail.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Ben. I'm work as the head of insights at SportBusiness, and part of my role each year, which I'm sure subscribers are aware, is to conduct the data research for the Global Media Report, which is a process where we take all of our data of over 30,000 media rights deals, build it into our modeling process, and then assess what the aggregate numbers are for each of the different sports, properties, and territories. And one of the key things that we found over last year's Global Media Report, the 2024 Media Report, is some of the movers and shakers in the sports industry in terms of sports that are performing well and sports which are struggling in terms of media rights revenue. So if you look at the golf media rights revenue here, we see a big jump when the PGA Tour's domestic deal in the US kicked in, and subsequently there's not too much growth. It's a pretty stagnant picture, influenced by the Ryder Cup on the odd years. And then if we go to the next slide, Duncan, we can see that this is quite an alarming state for golf when you compare to the other sports in the Global Media Report. So the caveat for the 2024 report is that there were major events in the Olympics and major football events, which obviously impact growth, and there was no Ryder Cup. However, as we can see here, golf is suffering from a stagnating, if not declining, media rights revenue picture on the aggregate, while other sports, which are maybe seen as more innovative in recent years or have engaged in a lot more interesting sort of competition format changes, are seeing significant growth over the period, and especially on a 2023 to 2024 comparison. And then if you look a little bit on the longer picture, as part of the Global Media Report, we project over 7 years, project forward, and then look at the recent historical performance. And if you look at the compound annual growth rate of golf, factoring in the fact that football and American football obviously started from a larger base, golf is the lowest performing sport out of any of the others that have made the top 10 in 2024. So while the picture is obviously still positive, it's still got a higher aggregate revenue than tennis and rugby, for example. It's clear that compared to other sports, maybe such as cricket and motorsport, which have noticeably improved their commercial outlook over the last few years. There's a position for golf to definitely improve and make sure that over the next few years, this share of the market is not declining even further. And that was sort of one of the reasons that we decided to dig into this in a more deep level through this report, based on the research that we did last year in the Global Media Report. And this brings us on to sort of the reasons why the media rights revenues may be stagnating and declining, is that there's been a trend over the last year or so in audiences across each of the majors, or most of the tournaments, sorry, declining. This is due to a number of factors that we uncovered in the report. Maybe younger viewers not necessarily interested in the most traditional format of the game. The disruptions obviously had an impact on the sort of perceived quality of the game as well. So there's a number of factors that have influenced this, which we'll go on to subsequently dive into. One thing to notice is the PGA Tour has reported a few improvements in viewership figures over the early tournaments this year. So it'd be interesting to note how that sort of progresses over the course of this season, and whether a lot of the decline, as we can see in this chart, was due to the initial disruption, or whether it was a longer term trend. So yeah, basically the overall reason that we decided for this report is to understand why golf is struggling and how it can improve and what the outlook is. So we'll get into that now.
Great, thanks, Ben. So yeah, now we're going to move on to the key storylines in the report. So obviously, this isn't the entirety of what we cover. It's just a taster of the different chapters, and Catherine is going to take us through these slides.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning for me, as I'm on the west coast of North America. Addressing this question, will the PGA Tour and Live Golf resolution appease fans? Well, this resolution has been a long time coming. As you all know, the two parties reached a framework agreement nearly 2 years ago. There's still nothing clear yet about how a resolution will look. Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour Commissioner, has said that reunification is a priority. And by that, it is understood that he means that the two tours would merge under the PGA Tour umbrella, which would allow the best players to play each other more often, which is that's what the fans are calling for. And it's something that has been lacking since Live Golf launched in 2022. We still don't know, of course, what any resolution will look like, but we do know that the PGA Tour has the widest media rights distribution of any any tour in the world. The coverage is available, live coverage is available in over 200 territories through deals with some 45 broadcast partners and streaming partners, and several of these contracts run right through to 2030. Live Golf, of course, has far fewer deals, none running past 2026, but they did make that game-changing deal with Fox Sports in the US just last month. So I'm going to hand you over to the data team now, who will provide some details on the two tours distribution.
Yeah, so as we can see here, Live Golf coverage has significantly improved over the last season compared to when the tournament launched. Most notably, the deal with Fox that replaced a previous deal with CW Sports, which was basically an entertainment-focused broadcaster. So that was a significant deal for Live Golf. However, the ratings from the first event on Fox Sports on the 13th of Feb, where they had an average of 54,000 viewers, which was half of the viewership on Fox Sports 2, despite Live Golf being on Fox Sports 1. So it'd be interesting to see whether that improved coverage sort of increases engagement on a wider scale, on a global scale, especially when compared to the PGA Tour, which has a number of distribution partners in the US and also has key partners across the world with Sky in the UK, WBD Europe, and Unex in Japan. So yeah, early signs for the Fox deal are slightly concerning for Live Golf, but I'm sure over the year we'll be able to observe whether that deal was as significant as it was perceived when it was done.
Yes, the question there, the PGA Tour has been investing heavily to reinvent itself over the past few years to modernize the product in the Live Golf era. from creating its tier of premium signature events to launching a YouTube Creator Council and producing a Netflix series. And incidentally, the first episode of Series 3 aired last night on Netflix. Now, the tour has invested over $50 million in its brand new facility, PGA Tour Studios in Florida. And it's a cutting edge live production facility where they will produce the PGA Tour World Feed starting next month at the Players Championship at Sawgrass. Now, this world feed will, according to the tour, fuel exponential growth by allowing for the creation of customized feeds produced and curated exclusively for international broadcast partners. The tour says that will result in higher viewership numbers, more engaged audiences, better ad sales, better subscription numbers, all of which should justify rights fee increases in upcoming contract negotiations. The PGA Tour already dominates media rights revenues globally. Let's see what the data team have to say about the amounts they currently earn.
Yeah, so as we mentioned, the primary driver for PGA Tour revenue is in domestic deal in the US, so $700 million. And then you've got key markets in the UK, which is the first international market in terms of media rights revenue, Europe as a sort of pan-regional deal, and then the joint third is Japan, France, and Canada. After the shuttering of Golf TV, it's interesting to see how the introduction of the world feed impacts key target markets going forward for the PGA Tour across APAC, Latin America, and Africa. That's going to be one of the key developments to watch, and I'm sure a key strategic key strategy for PGA Tour going forward.
Now, the DP World Tour, which we know was formerly the European PGA Tour, did suffer financially in the early 2020s as it increased heavily to head off competition from Live Golf and prevent a further exodus of players to the Rebel Tour. It was also hit by inflation and post-COVID supply chain increases, and to keep its head above water, it sealed a strategic alliance with its with its erstwhile rival, the PGA Tour, which helped it break even in 2023, and which also led to changes in its sponsorship model, whereby it carved out a top sponsorship tier, which did lead to substantial increases in sponsorship revenue. Let's have the data team give us a snapshot of the evolution of the tour's sponsorship revenues in recent years.
Yeah, hi everyone. When looking at the DP World Tour sponsorship revenue over the past few seasons, it's actually remained fairly stable. It's been in the 70 to 75 million range, that's dollars, each year since 2022. So whereas you might see that as a negative, I actually see that as slightly positive in the sense that it's had all this disruption and it's been able to retain its sponsorship revenue. This is mainly due to the fact that they've signed some long-term partners that consistently provide that annual rights fee on that yearly basis. So they've retained that same sponsorship revenue. As Catherine alluded to, with the adaptation and the DP World Tour title sponsorship deal, I think that was what's really triggered the change from it being a European tour to a world tour, even if it's just the naming rights. To have that financially backed almost gives that grounding to say, look, we're now moving from this continent to a global stage. This is in addition to the kind of global sponsors and partners that they've also signed with, which you can see with like Fortinet and Buffalo Trace. They're both two sponsors that are located in the US. And then you've got the likes of DP World and Emirates who are based in the UAE. I think the underpin funding from the PGA Tour, which is what we've mentioned in the report, is a good grounding also for the DP World Tour now to take what they have and maybe advance on that if they can. And I think this can also be seen as positive in the sense that I personally think that the DP World Tour has maybe been impacted the most with the disruption, just because of the fact that the players that have been lured away to Live and also the pathway that they've created to PGA Tour has ensured that their top talent has basically been taken away from that tour. Which then obviously is lesser exposure for their sponsors. So all in all, I think a good grounding. No negatives here yet, but I think a lot more work to do as they expand into a global stage.
Well, the men's majors, the four big tournaments, they are the most prestigious events in the golf, excuse me, in the golfing calendar. Like the tennis's Grand Slams, they're the tent poles of the calendar. They don't offer the most prize money. The biggest purse is the PGA Tour Players Championships, $25 million, as well as the $25 million that each live golf event offers. But what they do offer is something that in recent years the PGA Tour has not been able to, head-to-head competition among the world's best. And that in the majors is likely to continue throughout 2025 with the US Open and most recently the Open Championship this year in Northern Ireland, already announcing that they will offer exemptions for the top live golfers to play. So thanks to their ongoing strong fields, audiences, media rights sales, and sponsorship have remained robust for the majors. Let's have the data team take us through the richest major of them all, the US Open.
Yeah, so the US Open is, as Catherine mentioned, the richest major of them all. And if we look at the US figures specifically, where three of the majors are located, the second is the PGA Championship, and then third in terms of domestic media rights revenue is actually the Open due to the unique agreement with Augusta. When we look at the US Open specifically, over 80% of its revenue comes from the US market. But again, Sky UK and across Italy and DAC is also a key media partner for the US Open. In terms of one of the interesting things when we're looking at the majors is that the Open Championship is actually the only major where the international revenue is greater than the domestic revenue. And again, that's due to free-to-air agreements previously in the UK and now subsequently being replaced with Sky, and also the dominance of the US market as a global market in terms of golf specifically, but also the wider global media rights market as well.
Well, I'm personally fascinated by the impact that YouTube is having on television and sport, and it's everywhere these days. It's all over LinkedIn. It's in the media, and recent news I've seen has shown that TV is now the device most used to watch YouTube, and 73% of YouTube consumption is now long form of 30 minutes in duration or longer. And a final key figure is that in the fourth quarter of last year, YouTube earned a record $10.5 billion in advertising revenue, which is as much as ABC, ESPN, Disney Plus, and Hulu combined. I think that's really telling. Now, the golfing world has begun to catch on in a big way. YouTube golf creators and a number of top players have millions of YouTube subscribers. And the PGA Tour itself, it has 1.5 million plus of its own YouTube subscribers. It is making enormous strides in growing its YouTube presence. It's been unlocking and repackaging its archives, reinventing new storylines to engage new and younger fans, and of course, launching the Creator Classic series, which is a 9-hole tournament held prior to a PGA Tour event, and it's contested by popular golf influencers. And it was just announced, I think, on Monday that the Creator Classic series in 2025, of which I believe there will be 3, is going to be sponsored by YouTube. So this is a smart move. The average age of a viewer watching YouTube golf ranges from 18 to 32 years old, while the average age of a PGA Tour viewer on traditional linear broadcast is veering towards around 60. So as you can see, it's important to capture this new audience while not losing your traditional fans. Now, the data team has some interesting insight into how YouTube is taking a greater share of the TV audience.
Yeah, so for me, this is one of the most interesting parts of the report work that we did. I think it's obviously it has implications for the wider industry, but when we look at golf specifically, then the influence of YouTube golfers is significant. If you look at the 4 biggest YouTube golfers accounts, Rich Shields Golf, Good Golf, Grant Horvat, and GM Golf, they have a combined 6.8 million subscribers. And when we consider some of the statistics on the chart here, that YouTube accounted for 11.1% of the streaming viewing, which in turn accounted for 43.3% of the overall viewing during the month of December in the US, then it's clear that the importance of leveraging YouTube as a tool for golf broadcasters and golf media is growing and will continue to grow.
Well, women's sport really is the talk of the town these days, isn't it? Certainly here in North America, where the Caitlin Clark effect has not gone unnoticed, even in Canada. And as I mentioned, I'm here in Canada, and we're about to launch a professional women's soccer league, and the professional women's hockey league has done very well. So it is something that everyone from broadcasters to sponsors and fans are taking note of. Golf, I was just in New Zealand, and I was pleased to note that Lydia Ko is a household name. Everybody talks about Lydia Ko, and that I was pleased to see that. And of course, Nelly Korda is a global star, the American female golfer. The LPGA, the Women's US Tour, is the dominant tour in women's golf. It has the largest prize purse, which will be around about 131 million in 2025. And it has the widest distribution and largest revenue streams from media rights and sponsorship in women's golf. Now, thanks to its strong relationship with the PGA Tour, the LPGA is included in the men's lucrative media rights deals in the US, with the women's events all aired live on the Golf Channel and streaming platform Peacock. And there's a handful of events on broadcast TV on NBC and CBS, and then there's a few. I think there were 3 last year, and perhaps more this year on ESPN Plus. The LPGA gets a small portion of the total US media right fees paid by those broadcasters to the PGA. We understand, and I believe it was mentioned by Jay Monahan himself, that it's around about 5% or less of the total. And one senior golf executive I spoke to said that number was disrespectful to women's golf. So their challenge is to grow the game, grow their media rights revenues, and become more of a household sport. And that's the challenge for them. Let's see how their numbers look in our data charts.
Yeah, so as Catherine mentioned, they get towards between 5 and 10% of the total amount that the PGA Tour and LPGA get as part of their domestic media rights deal. Interestingly, in terms of international rights, they have quite strong deals in Japan and Korea, which are also notable sort of countries for women's golf. And it's going to be interesting to see how the continued growth of women's golf continues to impact the prize purse. Because if we look at the figure Catherine mentioned in 2025 at 131 million, back in 2020 that was just 41 million, so a 200% increase just over a six-year period. So again, strong signs for the game of women's golf, but it'll be interesting to see how that continues and how any future domestic media rights deals in the US are allocated accordingly.
Like the majors, the Ryder Cup has thus far proved relatively immune to disruption from Live Golf. It's one of the most compelling events in the golf calendar. It's contested, as you know, between the US and Europe. And the most recent Ryder Cup, staged in Italy in September 2023, was aired by 48 broadcast partners in over 200 territories worldwide, reaching some 620 million potential viewers. In the past 4-year Ryder Cup cycle, covering the 2021 and 2023 Ryder Cups, the two organizers, the PGA of America and Ryder Cup Europe, worked together to secure sponsorship for both events together with blue chip brands. And so there's one event, obviously, over that 4-year cycle, one event in Europe and one event in the US. And they did that for the first time. Previously, each organizer worked to secure sponsors in the US and in Europe singly, individually, for each individual tournament. So these new global arrangements have driven sponsorship revenues up significantly over the previous 4-year term. And I think we can get some pretty good data on that from our sponsorship, from our data team about the sponsorship.
Yeah, so as you can see there, it rose by 17 million, which equates to 48%, and that was from Whistling Straits in 2021 to Rome in 2023. If you actually look back at the previous European event, which was in Paris in 2018, and the most recent European event in Rome, the increase there is actually 153%. So you can see that sponsorship revenue has really increased with the strategy that you mentioned, Catherine, with the two federations coming together and having that global strategy where they can really leverage those worldwide partners. I think with it being such a small pool of sponsors, it grants that exclusivity and that exposure a lot more. And now you put it on a global stage with that, with those broadcasters, with those eyes on the event, it really increases the want and the need for sponsors to be there. I think ultimately as well, we have to consider that it is the best players in the world, with the exception of some Asian players, South American players, Australian players. It is the best players in the world. Therefore, people will watch this event, and that also, that adds to the want and the need of sponsors to be there.
Great, thank you guys. So now it's kind of time for the Q&A section. So if there's any questions you have, please do write them in, and we'll see if we can answer them. I thought we'd actually start this section by bringing Martin into it. I mean, Martin, I thought maybe you could give some context on what you think might happen this year with the PGA Tour and Live. There's obviously a lot of speculation, a lot of rumors and headlines being generated at the moment. But it's obviously something you cover every day. What's your opinion on the outlook for golf this year?
Yeah, hi Duncan. Hi everybody. I would caveat my answer by saying that I suppose it's an answer about the men's game. Catherine's gone through some of the figures around the women's game. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on there. And the Ladies European Tour has its own challenges in recent years as well. But obviously the headline is the men's game. We're edging closer to a resolution. I think you'll have all read the press. You'll have all seen certain political figures looking to maybe own a peace deal. The Masters is probably the latest guess we have for when there could be something unveiled. I mean, the PIF investment into PGA Tour Enterprises, which is coming, is going to be the key that unlocks the door. It's much more than just an investment. Clearly, it's going to have an impact on player access and players hopefully returning to the same tour, which will then drive commercial appeal for brands and broadcasters. We can only kind of foresee how that's going to look. My opinion would be that I could see live events, and specifically team events, living within a PGA Tour ecosystem. Team Live has developed team golf. It likes to own team golf, and that has resonated with a younger demographic, possibly not an older demographic. And we could debate, where team golf sits within, or this new iteration of team golf sits within the golfing landscape. But short term, I don't think anything can happen fast. PGA Tour has its agreement with FedEx, which is long term. It has its US networks deals to 2030. There's a lot to untangle. Live itself has just recently renewed with Adelaide until 2031. There's been, a lot of focus on some of their lesser attended events, but this has certainly been a big success in terms of the crowds and really owning that kind of international golf space in Australia. So this tournament locked in. Short term, not much can change, but that maybe gives us a flavour of where we might be going. I think we'll keep a watching brief on DP World Tour, where it fits into the puzzle, whether it could receive potentially some PIF investment, and whether it doubles down on its now very strong hosting and player and investment relationship it has with the PGA Tour.
Great, thanks, Martin. I've got a question here. I'm not sure who the best person to answer would be, but it's basically around Live Golf's broadcast deals, and basically the fact there's a lot of speculation that these deals are worth little to no money. So it is something we touch on in the report, but I wonder if anyone can give some context around that and the monetary value, if there is any.
I think that information has been quite hard to come by, and you're right, there is a lot of speculation. Ben, Aidan, do we know any more about that we can divulge?
Yeah, so our understanding of the US domestic, or the Fox deal in the US, is that there is a media rights fee involved. We're not sure on the exact figure at the moment, but there's also a revenue share deal in place there as well. I think that's a similar situation with ITV as well. So the information is that there's more media rights revenue than the initial deals and when it first launched, and the CW deal. But our understanding is, again, yeah, it's relatively minimal and it's incremental revenue share on top.
Certainly on the sponsorship side, I think the question extended to sponsorship as well, which I know is something that's been covered on SportBusiness sponsorship in terms of the the target prices that were set against different packages for Live and how the whole pyramid would look. That's certainly been covered by as a wider publication. I mean, we have covered that now. As the question rightly intimates, I don't think those target prices have necessarily been met, but that's how that was the figures that they were earmarked were certainly public.
Great. So next question is all around the Solheim Cup, and Aidan, maybe you're best placed to take this one. Basically, does the Solheim Cup have the same perceived value from sponsors in the women's game as the Ryder Cup does in the men's?
I would say probably from the outset, no. But what I would say is that sponsors in the women's game are probably seeing more of a close relationship with that game in terms of women golfers are seen as much more kind of more connectable, I guess, is a sense than the men's game at the moment, because obviously the women's game is not seen as much tournaments as the men's game is. So I guess in the sense of perceived value, yes, they are probably receiving more perceived value because of that. At the moment, it's hard to know what value the sponsors are seeing in the men's game. We have had some comments from some CEOs, for example, Wells Fargo. I know that they made a comment last year about how golf is really in a bad way for them as a sponsor, just because it's so fractured at the moment. So yeah, we don't actually have any kind of women's sponsorship deal information at the moment. So that's not something we've included in the report. As far as I know, we have included the broadcast revenues, as Catherine's alluded to. But yeah, sponsorship, it's not something we're looking at.
I will say for the Solheim Cup that they have brought in global partners for the 2024 edition. They had a record 5 global partners, and one of them, Skyscanner, that signed their first ever multi-year global sports sponsorship, and they chose the Solheim Cup because it ticked boxes in terms of both US and global appeal. And they said they wanted to sponsor a global event rather than something local. And they really looked at the global viewing figures. And because Skyscanner has a Singapore office, and women's golf is huge in Asia Pacific. So they wanted to think outside the box and do something different. And they said that the Solheim Cup really fitted in nicely with their global ambitions. So I thought that was quite relevant for the Solheim Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. Catherine, I actually have a question for you. I mean, obviously you've been in the numbers for weeks, probably feels like months, or probably is months. What did you find the most surprising thing in your research? The trends, the way the data.
Is this what we're looking at about the one finding that will blow your mind? That kind of question? Well, I spent a fair amount of time looking at the streaming and the YouTube aspects of not just golf but sport and television, and the numbers that really surprised me are to do with Netflix and YouTube and so forth. And one, well, the numbers that really leapt out are, first of all, 33% of the world's population now is 20 years old or younger. And I think that's something that sports federations and sponsors and so forth cannot take their eye off that ball, that a third of the world's population is 20 or younger. Another one that really blew my mind is about Netflix, which is now basically just TV, isn't it? Their current market valuation is 443 billion, or it was a few days ago. It's probably more now, but that is more than the market valuation of Comcast, Disney, Fox, Paramount, and Warner Brothers Discovery combined. So the message is, legacy broadcasters beware. Netflix is TV now. It sells ads and it shows live sport. So that's one of the things that, of course, Netflix is picking up internet global sports rights. It's picked up the Women's World Cup in the US and so forth. So that's one of the developments that really is capturing me.